Welcome to our ranking of all 15 Depeche Mode studio albums, from worst to best, including the new album Memento Mori. Depeche Mode has been one of the most influential bands of the last 40 years, with a discography that spans over 15 studio albums. In this video, we will be taking a closer look at each album, analyzing their strengths and weaknesses, and ranking them from worst to best. Been a Depeche Mode fan since the song People Are People. I heavily enjoyed listening to their earlier stuff, but hey, it was the 80s. So be kind. Without further ado, let's dive into my list. The last place is For Spirit from 2017. Well, in this respect I have a hard time to get much positive out of the album. At least nothing that would lift it above the average of the last albums or even close to the quality of those earlier Depeche Mode albums that were released between up to 1997. Going Backwards and Where's the Revolution are the best tracks. The rest, well, you can hear it or not. It's up to you. Coming in at number 14 is Depeche Mode's second album, A Broken Frame from 1982. While this album has some interesting experimentation with analog synthesizers, it doesn't quite have the polished sound that later Depeche Mode albums possess. After Vince Clarke has left the band, they searched for new horizons and directions. Only a few great tracks, My Secret Garden, Leave in Silence, and See You, Come Along. Coming in at number 13 is Depeche Mode's 2009 album, Sounds of the Universe. While this album has some solid tracks like Wrong and Peace, overall it feels disjointed and lacks the cohesiveness that other Depeche Mode albums possess. As with some Depeche Mode albums, there are some great and some weak songs. Here we have unfortunately more weak songs than gems, and this is probably one of the worst mixed albums I've heard in a long time. The drums sound horrible. Next on 12th place is Exciter from 2001. This album has some interesting experimental tracks. It's better than average album, but a bit disappointing to me, and it ultimately falls short due to its lack of memorable hooks and the feeling that it's missing that classic Depeche Mode edge. Next on place 11 is Delta Machine from 2013. While this album has some standout tracks like Heaven and Soothe My Soul, it ultimately feels like a retread of their previous work and doesn't offer much in terms of innovation. Coming to the top 10. Starting with place 10, Playing the Angel. After the very weak and for me also somewhat disappointing album Exeter, Depeche Mode presented with Playing the Angel, again a somewhat better and darker work. The album, which could be grouped by the sound between Songs of Faith and Devotion and Ultra with some Violator moments, includes 12 mostly heavy and partly also extremely dark songs, which, with the exception of Precious, first need a few passes until they unfold to the listener in full intensity. The new album, Memento Mori, made it into the top 10 at 9th place. On the new album, Depeche Mode finally succeeds again in captivating the listener with hypnotic sounds. The previous albums were by no means bad, but somehow seemed a bit forced. Thereby many elements from the past albums sound somehow so clearly Depeche Mode, but organically, without wanting to copy themselves. The song, Ghosts Again, had me a bit too hyped, though. It's just the best song on the album for me, followed by Wagging Tongue, Always You and My Favorite Stranger. Some songs remind me of Genn's work with Soul Savers, e.g. My Cosmos Is Mine, Don't Say You Love Me, Soul to Me or Speak to Me. Caroline's Monkey and My Favorite Stranger, People Are Good remind a bit of old Violator times and also of very early times, e.g. Never Let Me Go, without seeming anachronistic. Vocally a bit melancholic, but Dave is in top form. All this contributes to a gloomy hypnotic mood. Maybe now and then a few more driving beats would have done the songs good. But that's just my opinion. But the album needs more than 3 attempts to ignite. It's objectively not quite up to the first albums, but still for a long time again an album which pulls you into the spell. Next is Depeche Mode's debut album, Speak and Spell, from 1981 on 8th place. While this album may feel a bit dated at times, it's still a classic and features some of the band's most iconic tracks, including Just Can't Get Enough. But while this album set the stage for Depeche Mode's future success, it lacks the mature sound that the band would later become known for. At 7th place we have Some Great Reward. This album has some of Depeche Mode's most iconic tracks, like People Are People and Master and Servant, but it doesn't quite have the consistency of some of the band's other albums. Taking the number 6 spot is Ultra from 1997. This album marked a comeback for Depeche Mode after a period of turmoil, and features some of their most emotionally raw tracks like It's No Good and Barrel of a Gun. Taking the number 5 spot is Construction Time Again from 1983. This album marked a turning point for Depeche Mode, as they started to experiment with more political and social themes in their music. It also features some standout tracks like Everything Counts and Love in Itself, the first album in which Alan Wilder was involved. Coming in at number 4 is Black Celebration from 1986. This album has a darker, more atmospheric sound than previous Depeche Mode albums, and features some of their most iconic tracks like Stripped and A Question of Time. Coming at number 3 is Songs of Faith and Devotion. After the commercially most successful album, Violator, Depeche Mode hit their fans with Songs of Faith and Devotion, quite properly in front of the head. Surprising heaviness, with distorted guitar sounds and aggressive rhythms, also shook my ear when I put the CD in my player for the first time, and I Feel You sounded. Coming in at number 2 is Music for the Masses from 1987. This album was a commercial breakthrough for Depeche Mode, and features some of their most iconic tracks like Strange Love and Never Let Me Down Again, Little 15 and Behind the Wheel. That album could count as a best of compilation that has no filler songs. Every song is a gem, from the sublime song Behind the Wheel to the atmospheric ambient sound of Pimp. The boys show why they are a musical force to be reckoned and why they still sell out tours time after time. And finally, taking the top spot is Depeche Mode's masterpiece Violator from 1990. This album is a perfect showcase of the band's talents, featuring iconic tracks like Personal Jesus, Enjoy the Silence, Policy of Truth, as well as some of their most experimental and avant-garde tracks. This album has no filler tracks, so if you can say that at this high level of the group at all, this is their masterpiece. For the first time, Depeche Mode used acoustic guitars and sometimes sound really rocky, such as on Personal Jesus or Policy of Truth. Even the more quietly set worldwide hit Enjoy the Silence seems unusually guitar-heavy. The ballads Waiting for the Night and Clean are of such wonderful vocal intensity and perfectly orchestrated instrumentation. Here in 1990, the guys are at the absolute peak of their creativity. Thanks for watching. What's your favorite album? How do you like or dislike the new album Memento Mori? Peace.